So many people say all these things about him. He's definitely a polarizing person. Some people can't get with it and other people love him. He's a very picky person. He is very picky in who he hangs out with, how he spends his time. And if he's not interested in something, it's so funny, he'll just walk away. He took me on his private jet. We flew from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, had an awesome experience. He has allowed me to come into his life in a very generous way. He doesn't try to be above anybody. He doesn't try to act too cool or whatever. He's a normal person like anyone else. He has to like you in order to want to hang out with him. As you go through negative experiences in life, it's either a win or a lesson. It's not a win or a loss, but a win or a lesson. Looking at money differently, looking at business differently, looking at work differently. This guy is a genius. What is up, and welcome back to Zen Business. Now, I know it's been a little while since I recorded and produced for you guys, so my apologies. Just 5 weeks ago, I had a baby girl, poet Adele Maxim, which I love very much. It's been an awesome experience, and I am planning to make some content for the founders out there, the founding fathers, wow, and talk about how I managed the work and the dynamism of having a baby. But that's why I haven't been around that much. So I'm getting back into it, and I hope you can appreciate that. And one day you get to experience what I experienced with having my first baby girl. It's been a really fulfilling, rewarding, and awesome experience all around, even with all the lack of sleep. So with that said, I wanted to get back into our first episode back on the rhythm, talking about my experience working with Dan Bilzerian. I've been hanging out with him pretty consistently for the last year. In October of last year, I was invited to work with them on a company that they're building. I actually took an active role in the company. I'm CEO of it. And so me and him have obviously a lot of contact, being that heavily involved. You know, I manage all the budget for the business and oversee all the operations and things like that. So this is in addition to our app launch. Even though we're doing them together, you know, we're using some staff from my team over there and making it all work. Here are the 10 things I have learned from hanging out with Dan Bilzerian over the last 12 months. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to break down what it's like spending night at the guy's house, hanging out with him for a week, working until 2 a.m. together, going in the steam room, going in the ice baths. What are we doing? What are we talking about? How does this guy live? What's a day in the life of Dan look like? He's a mysterious character, and as we get into the list, you'll see why and how. But I've had an awesome experience. Offhand, it's been a 10 out of 10 experience. It's been grueling, intense, it's been fun, it's been sad, it's been difficult, it's been the whole range of emotions has happened. Because why? Well, we're starting a business. It's always tough, right? There's arguments to wins to long working sessions, etc. I'm going to share all that with you today. First of all, he took me on his private jet. We flew from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, had an awesome experience. He has allowed me to come into his life in a very generous way. And this is an indicator of how he is as a person. He doesn't try to be above anybody. He doesn't try to act too cool or whatever. I mean, he's a normal person like anyone else. He has to like you in order to want to hang out with him. He's not doing this stuff to appease people. In fact, that's the opposite of what he does. And that's why I'm so excited to get into it with you, because I think these lessons that I have learned from this experience, and this is why I'm sharing it, can have a huge and positive impact on your life. Because why? They've had a huge and positive impact on my life. The impacts that I've experienced, before we get into the list, the impacts that I have experienced have been higher confidence, of course, more beard, better at standing my ground, better at being candid, better at saying no, better at being brutally honest in a respectful way, looking at money differently, looking at business differently, looking at work differently. This guy is a genius. And I say that with absolute confidence. He is a low-key genius. And it's so funny because so many people say all these things about him. He's definitely a polarizing person. You know, some people can't get with it and other people love him. All of this, he's not an idiot to it, right? He is not ignorant to any of it. He is a mastermind. And so that's what I'm going to break down today is how does somebody like this think? And how do you achieve such levels of success that he did, from having a private jet to a deca-million-dollar mansion in Vegas to having all of the cars and girls and partying and anything that a guy could potentially want. Prior to working with him, prior to meeting him, I was kind of indifferent. I didn't follow him on Instagram. I didn't really have much of an opinion about him. I had been seeing YouTubes and things like that and thinking I had believed what they were saying. And I think this is just fascinating, because as we get into this, you're going to see that forget what anyone says. what can I learn from this guy? Again, love him or hate him, right? What can I learn from him? So here are the 10 things that I have learned from hanging out with Mr. Bilzerian. First of all, he is a master of curiosity. He is always creating enamor, eliciting curiosity, creating mystery. And it's funny because, in my opinion, he's a misunderstood guy. But he knows that. He doesn't care. Why? Because it creates interest. It elicits curiosity in people. And he uses that curiosity to his advantage. The fact that everybody wants to know what he's doing, and these investigative YouTubers go in and they parse apart his whole life trying to figure out what it's actually like, what actually happened in these circumstances, all of that interest generates more engagement for him. Right? People spend more time looking into him. They spend more time making videos about him. They spend more time talking shit, or, giving him props. And all of that leads to him getting more attention. So it's clear, I'm sure you can see this, he is a master at getting people's attention. Obviously, with his Instagram, that is the pinnacle of attention getting, right? He knows how to present a story, a narrative, an experience, a visual, whatever it is. He knows how to present that in a way where it captures people's attention. Like I said, there's a lot of people who are trolling him, and then there's a whole community of people who love him but don't talk about it, kind of like this silent majority type of notion. And of course, the loud ones are often a small group of people who are trying to get a lot of attention. They're basically just doing clickbait. But what is fascinating about Dan is he leans into people talking shit and leverages it for his own brand growth. So he takes what is negative energy and he channels it into positive momentum. And I think that is one of the best skills that a human can have, because as you go through negative experiences in life, it's either a win or a lesson. It's not a win or a loss, but a win or a lesson. Right? So how can you take negative experiences and turn them into positive momentum? And Dan is the master of that, right? When these people do these hour-long YouTubes breaking down his whole life and trying to poke holes in his world and whatever, all they're doing is creating more engagement and interest in his brand. It's an interesting way of becoming, of being a power broker, right? You're garnering attention so that you can have a voice that people listen to. What can we all learn from this? Well, everybody could balance their curiosity skill better. Everyone can benefit from becoming a more mysterious, interesting, intriguing, and curious presence, right? So think about what you're posting online. Are you showing your whole hand, or are you just tipping one card, right? And are you giving them a hint of what it could be like, leaving it up to their imagination to figure out what's really going on? Dan is the master at showing 1%, not 100%. A lot of people post on social media, they overshare, and then of course you flip through because you're like, oh my God, you've said too much information. I don't care, right? Whereas if somebody's really mysterious, for example, if somebody takes a video of you walking out of the house and there happens to be a Rolls Royce here and then, a Cadillac Escalade picking you up over there, you might not be posing on those cars, but it will be implied that they either belong to you or this is like your circle of people and so on. Dan is a master of creating that curiosity. You'll never see him just posing on a car. And I'll get into how he takes photos as well. You'll never see him just looking at the camera and posing or flexing his muscles. You'll never see it. It's all done through eliciting curiosity. He's never just on the nose about it. Even though his content seems very on the nose, when you look at it from a different lens, you'll see after today's episode, you will see how to look at it through a different lens, and you'll realize that he is not being on the nose at all. Everything is underhanded. Everything is subtle and underspoken. Even if it's a really bold statement like him walking up to a private jet with 20 girls, right? Somebody else took that picture, not him. And we'll get into that. Number one, elicits curiosity. He never just shows his whole hand. He uses poker analogies a lot, so I like those. It's easy to understand. He never just folds his cards for everybody to see. Instead, he tips them one number. Can't even see the suit of the card, right? He has a 2, right? Or he has an ace. But which color, which suit is it? Dan is the master at eliciting curiosity. So instead of spilling all the beans and putting it all out there, he spills 1%, right? And that 1% is the best part, and it's the most interesting and fascinating and the most eliciting of curiosity. Number 2, make it look easy no matter how hard you worked to get there. He uses this analogy about Michael Jordan or LeBron James or whatever. If you go and watch them play basketball, first of all, it's going to look effortless. They're going to be graceful, smooth, talented, expert, right? Like by the very nature of you watching an expert play, you're going to say, wow, he makes it look so easy. He's so good at that. Well, when in practicality, you're only seeing 1% of his life. The other 99% is spent preparing for that moment, for the finals game, right? No matter how hard you work to get there, make it look easy. And this is about masculinity, right? Like guys are not supposed to be all vocal and sharing their feelings and all this stuff. A real man who's either an alpha or a sigma is letting other people sing his praises. He's not singing his own praises. It's kind of like act like you've been there before, right? Like you're not out taking selfies and being like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Like if you're, at the, on the front row seats of the, the Lakers game, you're not talking about it and acting about it and taking all these photos and videos. Instead, letting other people take those photos and videos, letting other people talk about it. So again, this goes back to number one, eliciting curiosity, but he never is just like, hey guys, what's up? I'm at the Lakers game, got front row seats, and I took a private jet here. You'll never see him do that, right? It's all this air of ease and elegance and masculinity. He always makes it look easy. And this is what pisses people off so much because they're like, how does this guy do it so easily? He must have money. He must have this. He must have that. They just make up all these excuses in their mind. And the only difference of how he's handling it is he's just not selling the farm. He's not showing his whole hand. What I learned from this experience is you shouldn't be like talking as much. You should be walking the walk more, right? If you just show up in a Bentley, that's going to make way more of a statement than you going online and posting and being like, hey guys, I got a Bentley, right? Like people are going to be like, wow, you're cheesy and you're an arrogant and you're a prick, right? Whereas if you just show up in it, they're going to be like, oh wow, how'd you get that car? How much did it cost? Blah, blah, blah. People start asking all of these questions. And so for my own life, I think that people appreciate you more the less that you give. It's a weird and counterintuitive topic, but instead of trying to force your message down everybody's throat, instead let them ask questions, right? Go for a pull approach as opposed to a push approach, right? If you go into a sale and you're trying to force somebody to buy from you, if you're like pitching and pitching and pitching, all they're going to do is back off, right? Like Dan says, if you chase a cat, it's going to run away. But if you put your hand out and you hold a string, the cat will come to you. So how can you make the things in life come to you rather than you chasing them down? Dan is the master of magnetism. He knows how to draw people, experiences, money, business, everything that he wants into his life because he has mastered this idea of making it look easy and drawing people in, right? When people see him wakeboarding, when people see him off-roading or shooting guns, they want to be a part of that experience, right? They think that looks fun. They want to be a part of that. And so it draws them in, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So make it look easy no matter how hard you work for it. Number 3, he is radically candid. This guy is the most honest and straightforward person I have ever met in my life. And I mean that as a compliment because it is so hard to be as brutally honest as he is, but not hurtful. That's the thing. He is radically candid, but not hurtful. And he may call out a flaw or a mistake or something like that, but it doesn't hurt you in the same way as somebody making a targeted remark like, you suck, right? Instead, it's like, that landing page wasn't correct. We already talked about this, right? He could call something out, but instead of me getting hurt by it, I'm actually drawn in. I'm fascinated because I'm like, wow, this guy clearly understands this and he has a better vision than I had for it. So what can I learn from his vision? So instead of me being insulted when he calls me out on something, I'm actually drawn in and engaged. And by nature, I can feel more comfortable to call him out on something. If there's an idiosyncrasy, if he didn't keep his word on something or whatever, I can honestly say that and we can have a respectful interaction. Normally, my sister told me honesty without tact is cruelty. And I'm like, yes, it is in a sense, but if you know how to honestly and respectfully speak to people, you can say anything that you want. And Dan does say anything that he wants. He says exactly what he wants to say. Even if you're hurt by it, it draws you in. And that's been one of my experiences with him that I found so fascinating is like, at first, people are like scared of him or alarmed by it or insulted. But the more time you spend with him, the more you actually appreciate that level of honesty. And I just like wish everybody in the world had this level of honesty, as opposed to just pandering and buttering people up and making them feel good and patting them on the back and all this mental masturbation to preserve people's feelings. Dan is pretty objective of feelings. He's like, this is either right or wrong. It's either working or it's not working. And so again, it becomes very magnetic. It draws you in. You almost feel like you're like a masochist looking for more pain, because you're like, tell me more. I want you to call out the flaws that I want to work on, because it becomes that rewarding of an experience, because you're learning so much from a truly honest standpoint. So how I applied that in my life, I was getting on a client call with somebody who was upset, and I just called it, or no, the client wasn't upset. I was upset with one of my partners, right? And we got on the call and everyone was doing their niceties and, trying to be polite and all this stuff. And I was like, look, I'm just going to call a spade a spade. You guys are a month behind on this. You said one thing, you did another thing. We need to find a solution going forward, because what's currently happening is not working. And I said it just like that. The two partners on the call were like, whoa, okay. And then we had a super productive and healthy conversation. So I have applied this in my own life with how I interact with my wife, how I interact with my friends. If they invite me to do something that I can't go and do, I just tell them straight up, I can't go. I don't say, oh, let me talk to my wife about it, or let me look into it, let me check my schedule. Those are the things I used to say. Now I'm just like, I take some time to think about it, and then I go back and I say yes or no. Just really straightforward and candid. And keep in mind, when you turn people down, you're actually creating more attraction to yourself, because they're like, he's that much more rare, and therefore I want him that much more, right? So this is, again, one of those things that Dan has mastered, because when you have an attractive life, you have cars and lifestyle and money and all these things to offer, the more you say no, the more people will want you, right? And he's a master at saying no. He doesn't waste his time with anything, dude. Like, he's a very picky person. He is very picky in who he hangs out with, how he spends his time, blah, blah, blah. And if he's not interested in something, it's so funny. He'll just walk away. No explanation, just walk away, stop interacting and just go. What everyday people like me and you can learn from that is just don't be afraid of being honest, right? In fact, lean into it. And when you lean into it, it gets easier and people get less hurt by your words. And then you figure out how to say things in a respectful way where you don't hurt their feelings, because stuff it only hurts if it's emotionally charged. If I tell my friend he's a loser, that's very different than saying, hey, you made a mistake on this piece of the business. Let's look into that. Let's make it better, right? Like, that's a very different approach than calling out some emotionally charged thing. Like, when you're mad at them, you fucked up, you always do this, you always do that. Those things, when the emotion is involved, it's insulting. When the emotion's not involved, it's not insulting. Number 4, Dan is a man of few words. He doesn't blab at all. He doesn't speak first. He rarely talks about himself. He only talks about himself when you ask him questions. And he is open to talking about himself, but keep in mind, like, he's a celebrity, so he's got people like up in his business all the time. So he probably doesn't want to talk about himself that much. In fact, he's more interested in talking about concepts and theories and ideas and, my life or your life or whatever, than he is in talking about himself. By nature of not talking about himself, he creates more mystery, more curiosity. He is a man of few words, so people are inclined to ask him more questions, get him to talk, because they want him to open up. They want to understand his psychology. And the more he is conservative in how much he offers, the more demand is created, right? As supply goes down, demand goes up. So he really makes people earn his attention and respect. And this is also how he thinks about women, right? He doesn't just compliment women because they're beautiful. He only gives them respect and admiration once they've earned it. You became a nurse and you saved your mom from some condition that she had. Okay, I can compliment you for that, but I'm not going to compliment you just because you're tall and skinny and have, blue eyes, right? Like, I'm not going to give you a compliment for something that you didn't earn. I'm only going to pay respect where it's earned. That's the thing about respect. It can only be earned. You don't become respected by man or by people by having a car or whatever it is, success, etc. You become respected by earning their respect. And so Dan is really good about making people earn his respect, whether it's new employees, whether it's women, whether it's friends, partners, etc. He doesn't give you respect if he doesn't feel like you deserve it or you haven't earned it. He's not gonna waste his time dilly-dallying with people. Instead, he gives them the opportunity to draw it out of him and that's that. What's funny is that at one point the company had 40 employees and we let some of them go. Just certain people couldn't make the cut, right? It's very common with the new company. It's a cutthroat environment, and there were a lot of people who didn't make the cut. Why? Because they couldn't deal with the radical candor. They couldn't deal with the direct call outs. They couldn't deal with the intensity and the power. Like that is a strong environment to be in. Bullets are flying. People are nervous. Like it's a lot of people just can't make the cut. It's just is what it is. Number 5, Dan never takes pictures of himself. Think about it. Have you ever seen him taking a selfie? Go look on his Instagram right now. Tell me if you can find a selfie. He only lets other people take photos of him. He never poses. He never looks directly at the camera and smiles. If he's looking at the camera smiling, it's because somebody caught a candid moment. It's not because he posed. Now, it's funny because I work with this big inventory of photos, for marketing purposes that we're doing. I would say maybe 5% of the photos are from actual photo shoots. Everything else is just taking candid, in the moment stuff. And the photos are epic, but they're not posed. And this is go back to his level of authenticity. He never is like making it up. He's never faking it. He's just is what it is. If he's doing something cool and somebody snaps a photo of it, boom, he gets the photo. But otherwise, that's it. He doesn't take selfies. He doesn't ask, photographers to like do these photo shoots with him and all this stuff. You won't see anything posed. And it's funny because his shit all still looks good. His smiles and his face look good. His body looks good. Like the circumstances are cool, like, nice settings, etc. But it's not just like a perfectly polished photo of him standing in the center of the frame and like looking out over the beach or whatever. It's never that. It's him doing fun, cool stuff. So what can you learn from that? What can I learn from that? Dan taught me about creating an experience of fun around you, doing fun things, letting the experiences draw people in, right? So people want to be a part of fun stuff. Hey, your buddy has a boat. You guys all go out on the boat. Of course, there's going to be some magnetism. People, girls and guys are going to want to come on that boat with you. So he focuses on having a good time and letting people capture those moments with their camera rather than creating the perfect photo. But in fact, he has one of the largest followings. He's got 70 million followers across the internet, and he hasn't taken any of his own photos. He hasn't posed for any of them. He's just done cool shit and let people see it. Number 6, he's a genuinely good guy, but he doesn't talk about it. Dan donated a very large sum of money to my wife after her mother died. He did it under a pseudonym so that nobody would know who it was. He just wanted to help out. And that's the kind of guy he is. Even with all the shit that people talk about him, he is actually donating more money than most people out there. He did that. He didn't even tell us his name. I had to ask people and triangulate who donated this huge donation to our GoFundMe. And it turned out it was Dan. He actually does a lot of charity. He gives back a ton. And this is where I disagree with him. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with getting acknowledgement or talking about it. But he never talks about his charity. He never talks about his donations. Why? Because he doesn't want to be virtue signaling, which I do respect. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about a cause that you care about and how you are making donations to it. Maybe don't say the number. But I found that funny because he is so against seeming insincere and faking it and bullshitting that he won't even take credit for the good things that he does. Number 6, Dan protects his brand at all costs. He never posts anything that doesn't align. In the process of building a company for him, of course, I was firsthand to extensive approvals, tons of changes back and forth about which brand, which messaging, which images are going to work for the brand. I thought it was absurd. I thought it was over the top, the level of refinement and optimization that we do. But when I step back from it, we're 9-12 months into building this company and we're just about to launch it. But the product and everything is so perfected. It's so precise. It's just excellent. The quality is immaculate. Everything was built from scratch. Everything came straight from source with his inspiration. The layout of the business is drawn from a completely original place, completely authentic to him. And after this long time of building the company, all of us working so hard, 12-hour days for the last 12 months, like a grueling amount of work. But after it's all done, I look at what we've created. I'm just like, holy shit, this is awesome. And it wouldn't have been as awesome if we had listened to his team, myself included, who were like, let's just launch and get feedback and then optimize. He is not going to risk tarnishing his brand by putting out something that's incomplete. Think about it. If he put out a business that had, loose ends, people would be criticizing the shit out of it. Plus, they would also probably be calling it a money grab or a scam or all of these things, and he can't have that happen. The difference between how somebody, an everyday person thinks, or maybe how I think and how he thinks, is I am going to be carefully curating how I'm presented. I'm not just going to throw stuff out there. And he's really good at only presenting the image that he wants to be received. So what can you learn from that? Well, what kind of photos are you putting out there? What kind of content are you publishing? How are you talking about your brand? What kind of messaging are you using? Take an outsider's look at it and say, like, what would I think of this brand if I just saw it? If I just stumbled on it on Instagram. Number 8, Dan is directly and overtly challenging. He loves challenging people and he loves being challenged. Now, in my opinion, this is the signal of what a real man is. A real man is somebody who can look conflict in the eye and respectfully debate. And I've watched a lot of people, mostly the people who got let go or fired or whatever, who did not challenge him, right? They just agree with everything that he said because he's the big shot in the room and he's tough and he's cool and blah, 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 instead of debating him. But the people who debate him are the ones he actually respects. So if you're just a doormat and let him walk all over you, he'll have no respect and he'll just, stop associating with you. Whereas if you challenge him and you have conviction and you're right about what you're saying, or at least you believe that you're right, he respects that a ton. But again, the people who just agreed with everything that he said became nobodies, and they just, eventually got sorted out and removed from the equation. How I learned from that, well, candor comes with challenge, right? A lot of people are not candid because they don't want to challenge people. Now, for me, when I'm either on sales calls or I'm talking to my team, I am challenging them all day long. And I think that they are probably getting sick of it, but instead, it will eventually create more energy for them when they learn to receive it in an optimistic way, right? So like, why am I being challenged on this? Can I debate this in a healthy way? And this is something that we really lack in politics today, is that humans, American society, are not willing to have healthy conflict. They're not willing to argue over the facts. They just want to have this passionate discussion and get fiery and, assassinate somebody. We could all benefit from people being more directly and overtly challenging to each other. There are so many interesting things about Dan that it's very hard to even condense it into 10. Now, I'm happy to make more content like this if you guys like, and Dan's, of course, okay with it. I'm going to have to run this episode by him. But the thing that I find most fascinating about Dan, out of all the things that I have learned from this guy, is that he does ridiculous things and ask questions later. Dan's motto is try ridiculous shit, ask questions later. He told me a story about when he was just out of college in San Diego. I find it interesting because I was in San Diego about the same time, and I went a similar path, honestly. It was kind of weird. My brother's in the Marines. I went to San Diego to visit him, ended up living there. Dan was in the military, also ended up living in San Diego. He took one path. I obviously took a different path. The path he took was super fascinating to me, though, because Dan made friends with a guy who had a mansion in La Jolla. For whatever reason, this mansion could not be occupied because of some legality, so he couldn't sell it. He couldn't live in it. So Dan worked out a deal with this guy where he said, hey, I'll throw dope parties at your mansion if you let me live in it. So Dan actually got to live in this mansion from this guy at the top of the hill in La Jolla, and was just out of college. Like, how does somebody like that pull that off? It's just extreme creativity and brilliance, right? Like, how do you even come up with this shit? It reminds me of back when I was in Philly and my buddies were like, hey, we should get this penthouse. There's this penthouse at the top of the city. It's 4,500 square foot. The rent was obviously high, and we didn't even, we had money, but not like that, We eventually manifested it. That was the crazy part. We eventually moved in and we had this epic experience living there. Dan is the master at trying ridiculous shit and asking questions later. Another story that he told me, that I've observed as well, is he took Ignite public. Now, say what you want about the brand. In fact, that company makes a ton of money. That company is minting money, and everyone talks shit about it. They don't realize that he took it private and he's been making all the profit off of it. That company is crushing it. It has big footprints overseas and all these different places. In America, it's like whatever, right? But in these other markets, it's crushing. So it takes a lot of balls to take a company public and to deal with all the backlash that he dealt with. And still today, that company is minting money for him. So love him or hate him, if he goes and does something ridiculous like taking a company public, people may be talking all the shit that they want, but this company is printing tens of millions of dollars each year. So say what you will. He has done obviously all kinds of stuff. He's gotten away with all kinds of shit that's just like completely crazy and ludicrous. It's also made him who he is today. That's what he's known for. He's known for being a major risk taker. And I got so much respect for that because today, honestly, I think we live in a generation of pussies. People are afraid to take risks. They're afraid to put themselves out there. And Dan is somebody that I think exemplifies pure fearlessness. So my respect to him on that. I know I said I would only go through 10, but I'm actually going to go through a few more because I think these are just so interesting. So another thing that he says is any man can make himself more attractive. You can make yourself more magnetic, whether it's like, attracting women in your life or attracting wealth and success and all this kind of stuff. For example, he's like, teeth, you got fucked up teeth, you can go get that fixed. You're fat, you can go work out in the gym. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be rich to do that, because a lot of people think, oh, Dan has all these things because he's rich. In fact, he already had all of those things before he got rich. He was already into working out. He was already good with girls. He became famous because he got girls, not got famous and then started getting girls. The way that landed for me is if you're unhappy with something in your life, just get it fixed, right? Like if you don't like the way your hair looks, change your hairstyle. If you don't like the way your style looks, change your style. If it's not like getting the kind of attention that you want, you can make yourself more attractive in life. And I find that so interesting because so many people just assume that I'm ugly, I'm poor, I'm this, I'm that, I'm Indian, I'm Asian, I can't have this because of that, I can't have that because of this. And these are all just limiting beliefs. He has none of them. He's like, if I want to do it, then I'm going to go do it. That's all there is to it. It's not like, oh, I can't do this because that narrative never goes through his mind. Instead, it's if I want to get this outcome, what do I have to do to get there? If I want to have a perfect body, what do I have to do to get there? If I want to have perfect teeth, what do I have to do to get there? If I want to have 1,000 women in my life, what do I have to do to get there? So he is the master at making himself more attractive because he said it in his own words. He's not especially tall, he's 5'9", but still gets more chicks, right? But guys will be like, oh, you got to be tall and rich and blah, blah, blah. But in fact, in practicality, guys who lead with money, with girls, often end up being seen as sugar daddies, and they become seen as betas because it's like, this guy is just like doing everything he can to win my favor, and I'll take it or leave it, right? So any man can make himself more attractive. So you can apply that in your own life too, right? Like anybody can go make more money. Anybody can go get in better shape. Anybody can throw better parties. It's all just up to you. The last one that I'll say, there's more on here, but I want to keep this as succinct as I can. Dan feels like a very big presence in real life, even though I'm taller than him. His energy is very powerful. Walks into the room, everyone kind of feels it, right? He's not especially tall, but he feels big when you talk to him. It's really weird and interesting because he might actually be shorter than me, but he feels big. So how do you create that kind of presence? Well, obviously, he got into great shape. I think that definitely helps. He's bulky, he's big and strong. But also, he is an intimidating person, right? So you hang around him and you're like, damn, I don't want to say the wrong thing. This guy would he's a beast. He might tear me up, And I think everybody could benefit from having that kind of strong presence. And I think that's a result of him just having extreme, strong, masculine energy. He's leaned completely into his masculine. He's very confident. And it's funny because, like I said earlier, he's a low-key genius, even though he, has never presented himself in that way. He just presented himself as a party boy who had fun and did whatever he wanted. But obviously you don't get to his level unless you have some degree of genius. But the funny thing is all of us have some degree of genius. It's just who is willing to lean into it and lever it to 1,000x. Dan leaned into his strengths and levered them 1,000x. And that's how he got where he is. He leaned into his ability to work out 1,000x. He leaned into his ability to make money 1,000x. He leaned into his ability to get girls 1,000x. And now you see the outcome, right? A guy who has everything that any guy could ever ask for. So say what you will. The guy has had an incredible impact on my life. He's taught me so much. Even if everything were to fall apart today, I would be so grateful for the experience, and I only have positive things to say about him. And I laugh when people say low frequency, negative things about him, because I'm like, dude, if only you understood, if only you could be there for a moment with him, because I think anybody given the opportunity and somebody who took it would be like, wow. They would be so grateful for the experience. They would not be talking shit. But that's also why they're just haters, right? They're just going to sit in the corner. They're going to sit in their mom's basement, jerking on, OnlyFans or Pornhub, and going to keep doing what trolls do. Meanwhile, there's other people out working hard, leaning into their expertise, attacking life, taking risks, doing what they want. And those people become like Dan, whereas these haters just end up sitting in the dark and jerking it. Choose your poison, right? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more of this type of content, comment down below, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Cheers.